You know what I think it's time for? A new timeline in the Texas Chainsaw franchise, because up to this point I don't think we've quite had enough of those yet. So last weekend I watched the new Texas Chainsaw film. I did feel a tinge of sadness as I was doing so that it wasn't at the cinema. It does feel like not a lot of horror films are being shown at the cinema at the moment. It used to be that you'd get a new one of some description every week, every couple of weeks, but over the past 3 months, all I can remember showing at my cinema is Scream. It's pretty slim pickings at the moment. I hope that improves as the year goes on. It certainly feels like a new Texas Chainsaw film should be at the cinema, but I guess at least we've got a new one thanks to Netflix. So this one is a sequel to the original film. It ignores all the sequels, so it's doing the Halloween 2018 thing. We've even got the original final girl, Sally Hardesty, back, albeit played by a different actress. So this is right out of the Halloween 2018 playbook, isn't it? Except Sally is a minor character in this film, whereas in the Halloween remake, Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode was absolutely one of the stars. So the main plot sees a group of young people buying a ghost town somewhere in Texas with the intent of immediately selling it on to a bunch of investors who also happen to be young people. I must admit I was a little bit befuddled as to the plot with this. I mean, in the UK we don't have ghost towns, so I'm not familiar with whatever business practice they're up to at the start of this. We just don't have enough land on this island for there to be ghost towns. We don't have massive, great, barren lands like what you might see in Texas, but I guess it doesn't matter. I sort of got the general gist of what they might have been up to. It doesn't matter. So, of course, the ghost town that they're buying, Leatherface just happens to have been squatting in this place for quite some time. He's got a woman who cares for him, and when all the youngsters turn up, she has a heart attack because she's really stressed at the prospect that she might get evicted, and Leatherface doesn't take too kindly to this, so he goes on a rampage, starts killing off all the main characters and the investors, and we're into our movie. Now, I saw the trailer a couple of weeks ago, and I guess I thought it was all right. It didn't blow me away or anything, and the plot as described, it doesn't sound that great. I mean, if somebody told me what I've just told you, I think my first reaction would be, I think maybe they should have gone back to the drawing board on that one. But you know what? This film, wait for it, is actually pretty good. A lot of the fundamentals of horror are done quite well in this film. There are lots of scenes where characters are hiding under the bed, or they're under the floorboards, or they're just creeping around the buildings with loose floorboards creaking beneath their feet. There's a nervous tension in the air as you're wondering whether Leatherface is going to find them. I had gooseflesh on my arms during quite a lot of this. And I don't remember a lot of this sort of stuff being in the original Texas Chainsaw. In that film, most of the characters were either just being killed or running. There wasn't a lot of this stealth stuff, but I find that kind of horror very effective when it's done well. And what a pleasure, by the way, to see a female character actually hide properly in a horror film, as is what happens here. So the girl who does the most hiding in this film, this is an impression of her when she's hiding. Now, here's an impression of just about every other female character in a horror film ever when they're hiding. I'm constantly just yelling at the screen. Get yourself killed. But yeah, there's a great atmosphere in this film. Even before Leatherface goes on his rampage, there's a real sinister air in this ghost town. There's not a lot of humour in this film, but if they had, there definitely would have been room to put some in, because this film at times, aesthetically, almost looks like the Texas Chainsaw meets A Fistful of Dollars. That street outside, it just feels like a western town. You could have had Leatherface pop up at the back end of the street, just come into view, and then a little western chime like, sound out. But I'm not saying that I wish that sort of stuff had been in there. I'm just saying there's some good gore in the film, good splatter. It's never too disgusting. There are satisfying kills in this, but nothing that makes you want to turn away and reach for the sick bucket or anything like that. It's just good, artistic, bloody horror. There's one scene in particular which I think in the long term will give this film its identity, if it hasn't already. Now, I am going into spoilers here, but you know what? I had this scene spoiled for me by another reviewer before I watched the film, and it made no difference. It made no difference to my enjoyment, just saying. So I refer, of course, if you have seen the movie, to when Leatherface goes into the bus and just murders all the investors. It is literally a chainsaw massacre, and it's absolutely glorious. It's filmed so well. It reminds me of the massacre at the end of Halloween Kills, but this one is so much better. It's edited better. It's got better gore. I was also reminded a little bit of when the Predator goes on the train in Predator 2, but I really enjoyed the scene in this particular Texas Chainsaw remake. The only thing I would have done different is have maybe one of the red shirts get away somehow. That would have added a bit of realism. Surely one of them would have got out a window or sneaked past Leatherface, and would it have affected the horror? If one of these guys, you'd just seen them running over the hills with their tails between the legs? No, not at all, but whatever. It's still a bloody great scene. Now for the negatives, they're not major sticking points, but still things that I'd at least like to delve into a little bit. So, first of all, Sally Hardesty. I don't mind her being in this film, but that character's appearance certainly doesn't bring the emotional weight that I think the writers, producers were hoping that it would bring, and the big problem, of course, is the fact that it's a different actress, I believe Marilyn Burns, who played the original Sally, died around 2014. Gunnar Hansen, who played the original Leatherface, died in 2015. Having two completely different actors doing this reunion in the street at the end of this film, it just doesn't make me feel anything. I feel like my hair should be rising up on my neck at these two back together again after almost 50 years, and that's just not the case. It needed to be the two original actors, or why bother? They missed the opportunity to do this back in the 90s or the noughties. I've seen films where even one of the actors doesn't come back for a potential reunion and it doesn't work very well. Think of Hannibal, when Jodie Foster was replaced by Julianne Moore. You still had Anthony Hopkins in there, but because it wasn't both Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, it didn't work. Halloween's very lucky to get away with it just having Jamie Lee there, because it doesn't really matter who's behind the mask so much of Michael Myers, but in this instance, it just didn't do a lot for me having Sally in the film. The only scene of hers I enjoyed is when she goes to the cornfield and she finds Leatherface's artistic work that he's done on his Guardian. He's strung her up on a bench in quite an interesting way. I've always said that they should eventually make a Texas Chainsaw sequel that takes place straight after the first film. They've not done that yet, which is crazy when you think about it. But I also say that they should not involve Sally Hardesty in such a film, because I think when you watch the end of the first Texas Chainsaw, when she gets away, that's it, she's gone. She ain't coming back. Screw all this revenge and can't get over it bullshit. Most girls are not going to rent a house in the middle of Texas, sit there for 40 years with all their shotguns and pistols on the wall, just waiting for someone to say over a CB radio, "Oh, we've had a Leatherface sighting, you'd better get down here, Sally." It's just not happening. So the storyline we get in this film, this particular subplot, it doesn't quite work for me. The other thing that I wasn't quite so hot on was the beginning of the film. I think we get to spend 1 minute with these characters before they arrive at the ghost town, and I think there should have been much more of a cross-country trip where we get to know everybody. This film clocks in at about 83 minutes. I think it should have been 93 minutes. I think we should have got to hang out with the characters as they take photos of dead armadillos and hold conversations with one-toothed men in gas stations, that kind of thing. This is part of what made the original Texas Chainsaw so great. You had that nice slow build up to the carnage, and here it's like they don't even bother. They just get straight into it. So those two things would be my negatives. They're not deal breakers, but they're certainly things that I wanted to address in this review. Well, it's now time to go to the Bag of Terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this movie, and then I'll say a final few words. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 3.5 bloody axes out of 5. That is more than I thought this film would get before I watched it. When I heard that it was going straight to Netflix, and I'd also heard that there were a fair few production problems with this film. Yeah, I was sort of worried about it, but I needn't have been. It turned out really good. And I think this is one of the better Texas Chainsaw films. That said, I'm not going to do an updated ranking, because I only did a Texas Chainsaw ranking on this channel about a year ago. If I did it again now, I would literally just be dropping the new film in. I don't feel like rewatching all the others at this point. I only watched them about a year ago. So I think I'm going to wait until the 10th film comes out. Surely there'll be another one at some point further down the line. And then I will do another ranking. We'll have a perfectly even number of 10 films at that point. And I think by then I will also feel like watching the other films again, just to see if any of my opinions have changed on those ones. What I might do instead, just for the sake of doing something, is I might do a Texas Chainsaw Final Girls ranking. Now, I did this with the Halloween franchise a while ago, and I thought it worked quite well. And I think it's especially worth doing with Texas Chainsaw because there's literally 9 different Final Girls for the 9 movies. So yeah, I think I will do that actually. So keep an eye out for that. That'll be very soon. But other than that, I will wrap this review at this point. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.